Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. And today's episode is one I think a lot of people want to hear. It's a topic I hear people going down this route a lot, but I don't know if a lot of people succeed. And that's how to build a business beyond a self-employed LLC. Very important topic. Actually, a topic of passion for me. I'm very excited to dive in with our guest, Jonathan Miller. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me, Brandon.
So this, as I kind of hinted at there, this is a topic a lot of people talk about. They want to build businesses. They want to leave their job and open a business and have this dream life, but very few people get past the self-employed LLC. I don't know the exact stats, but I think it's somewhere in the range of 63% of small businesses are self-employed LLCs. So let's start there. Why is that the case? And what have you seen over the years of being a business owner yourself?
Well, first of all, I think that to point out, you said something really important, that a lot of people want X, or they want to have a business. And it even starts beyond that, because there's definitely people in the self-employed realm who just don't have another job, right? They just, and so it's always about how you're approaching your business and pursuing your goals and what you really want. And I've said many times that people see the glory, they don't know the story. Or you've heard maybe people, they want the view, but they don't want the climb. And building a business is tough, and it takes a lot of work. And you might only be good at a few of the things that it requires to help a business be successful. Yet it's your idea. You're the one who's passionate about it. You've gotten it to a certain point. And if you want to scale it, which I saw one of your episode titles is like, maybe you don't want to scale it. Couldn't agree more, right? Because you're getting yourself into a lot of work and a lot of challenge, which can be invigorating for certain people. Other people might hate it, but it's always building things that you want to do, not just because you think it looks cool, but it's because it's something you feel driven to do, you're motivated to do, and you have the skill set, or you're willing to acquire the skill set to do it. But it's definitely a big transition, I think, when you go from doing all the work and getting most of the income, and you have minus a few expenses, to, oh, wait, we need to make sure that we're budgeting some of this cash flow to pay for marketing, preparing for payroll, or hiring people. And I think that's a very difficult transition. We can dive into that to whatever extent you'd like.
Yeah, as soon as you said the word budgeting, I felt all of our listeners' eyes just glaze over. No, I'm just kidding. But that's honestly, I joke about it, but I see a lot of small business owners and entrepreneurs do that. When you start talking about actually what it takes to run a business and grow a business, they're like, I don't want any part. I just want the fun stuff. I want to keep doing what I'm good at. And there's a balance of the two and an evolution that needs to take place for most people. So I'm curious to hear your perspective on this in starting the process to grow beyond self-employed LLC. You've done this for yourself, as far as I know, at least one time. I don't know how many companies you've had. And a lot of your clients have done this too. So you have a very unique perspective. What is kind of that first step if you're new to business, or maybe you've been doing this for a decade or two and you're still self-employed? What is that next step that people should take?
Yeah. I want to start out with saying there's nothing wrong with being self-employed, right? I mean, you get control of your own destiny. You can get, and for a lot of people, that's great. You get paid more money. But the challenge with being self-employed is that the work is dependent upon you. You have a lot more flexibility, but it's your efforts that contribute to the results. And if you are making a lot of money, you're probably working a lot. And if you're not making a lot of money, it's because you're not working a lot, maybe by choice, maybe because you just don't have enough to do. And so it can be challenging. So the first thing I would say, because this happens for financial advisors in our business, we have about 40 financial advisors around the country. Most of them have been with us a long time. They do very well. But what happens when you're paid 1099 the first thing just structurally is it's not like getting paid as an employee, right? You're going to have self-employment tax, you're going to have business expenses. And people, I think of it as just this positive, like, oh, I can just write some things off. Therefore, I should start a business so I can write things off. Well, you can only write off legitimate business expenses. And there is probably some flexibility with things that you might not be writing off now. But what happens is in a lot of times when people are in a business or self-employed, when they're getting 1099 income, they view that as their income, just as an alternative. They're just getting paid differently. And that's the first mindset I would say that most people need to, at some point, transition. Because if you're looking at all of the revenue that you receive as your income, and, oh, by the way, I got to pay for this and I got to pay for that, then you're not viewing it as a system. You're viewing it as, this is my income, and gosh, I'm going to have to take my income and spend it on that. I'm not sure if I want to spend it on that because I like the lifestyle. So it almost creates this, it's hard because you have to make money to live up front. But when you do it that way, you run into some, I think, psychological challenges that you first have to come to terms with if you want to go to that next step. I'll give you another example. In the entertainment industry, as a film producer, we used to go out to these film festivals, and there'd be people said, hey, I made a film for $50,000 and it did really great. It made $100,000. I said, that's awesome. I said, did you pay yourself? And they say, well, that's kind of the problem. And in my mind, as a business owner or an entrepreneur, I'm like, that's a huge problem, because really the only reason it was profitable is because you were willing to sacrifice your time and put time in and not get paid. So you do need to make income, and your business needs to sustain, and it's got to get to that point. So there's this critical mass point you have to get to just in general, unless you're putting in capital or financing it with debt, which most people don't recommend. And I wouldn't recommend either. But then it comes into saying, all right, if I'm going to look at the revenue that's generated, and then what's the first step in structuring things and setting up a business, and what are my expenses, and then how much am I going to get paid, and can I live on that, and is that okay for me? And then how do we grow it from there? Because the number one thing that, I don't want to say it's an amateur approach, but I think a lot of people, if you watch Shark Tank, I think the sharks or Mark Cuban would definitely be on top of people, because they go, well, look at all this revenue I made. And it's like, great. What's your profits? Well, don't have any profits, or we're in the hole. And so it's not just about revenue, right? Generation. It's about running a profitable and successful business that sustains your lifestyle, that creates a value for shareholders, yourself, or other people in the future. And then you can grow it from there. But the advantages are, of course, that you can then create a system that can grow beyond what you personally could do, unless you're an influencer with hundreds of millions of followers. But even then, you probably have a staff.
Yeah, I mean, even in that scenario, it's risky, because the business or the income can't go beyond you. And I think the only person that comes to mind who has even tried this is Tony Robbins. And love him or hate him, don't care. We're going to take that off the table. But he built a business around himself as a personality. And now he is trying to step away from that, but it's not doing as good of a job. He still needs to be there and be present. The same thing happens when you are self-employed and you run your own business. You're doing all of the things. So Jonathan, you so beautifully said earlier, we're not condemning that. We're not shaming that. It is an option, and that's awesome if you want to go down that route. When I look at this, though, it's just a risky conversation to have. Is this going to be how you're going to set up the rest of your life? Because you can't sell that business. You can maybe sell the client list, the IP, whatever you have, but you have no future. So from that perspective, that's how I want to look at this conversation, not from who should and who shouldn't.
Yeah.
But let's think long-term around what are we actually going to do with this business? Is it going to impact more people beyond us? So from that perspective, where do you see people kind of take the wrong step, if you will? It's people who, let's say they've tried to hire employees, they've tried to grow their business, and then maybe they scale back. Do you ever see scenarios like that where they have 1, 2, 5 employees and then they end up being self-employed again in a matter of months or years?
I think I've seen it on bigger scales than that, even, because I think sometimes what happens is, if you don't mind, I'm going to back up one to set this up before I answer the question. Back up one thing. I think that the first critical thing, if you want to build a business, you have to start thinking in terms of we and ours, and not me and mine, right? That's the first thing is this entity that you're going to be creating and pouring your energy in is going to be not just about you as an individual. There are personality-based businesses, but in general, it's about the system and it's about us doing things together. And you have to get a group of people and systems working together, and you have to lead that, and people have to buy in. And I think that people do it because they see the long-term payoffs at times, but that is so far removed from the amount of work that you're going to have to do to get there that you have to, it has to be something that you're willing to do. We're all optimistically naive when we first start out on that path, thinking, oh yeah, I've modeled it out. It's going to go like this, then that, then that, then that. And I think there's quotes out there that say that the best laid plans, they don't survive first contact. You have to start modifying and overcoming challenges. And it's not what you did think of, it's what you didn't think of or forgot to think of, or some curveball or the economy or whatever. So what I have seen though is that people, because they're not deliberate about it, and I've had actually a good friend I can think of who did this, and it was worked out great for him, but he had grown a business. It was probably 10, 15 years ago, maybe even. And he had built a very successful business. It was in the travel industry. Basically owned schools around the world where people could go and study foreign languages. And he was really doing well. But as it grew, the infrastructure grew with it. And I think they had 50 employees or something like that. And he basically made a decision at some point that he was able to sell that business, buy a different one, similar industry that only had like 5 or 6 employees. Basically, though, the profit was about the same. He was still doing something in his field that he liked. And he looked at it and he said, here it's just massive amount of work. Here it's going to be a problem. Now he's then taken that and grown it as well and had other challenges to overcome. So I think maybe sometimes you do it and then it takes on a momentum of its own, and then you have to just readjust, because I think going down the path of a business in that upswing that everybody's trying to create, there's just so many challenges you face. You get it going and then something happens and then somebody quits, or you have a challenge that was unforeseen, and you have to be able to deal with that over and over and over again. And you do get better with it, hopefully, if you can maintain the right attitude over time. And so then you get to do it again and say, I'm going to do it more efficiently. But sometimes if it gets too big, it takes on a momentum of itself where you're really almost doing a completely different job than you were as a self-employed person. And you might be like, I hate managing this or that or people, or it's not my strength. And then you either have to hire someone else who is good at that, or you have to, make tough decisions. And that's what's always going to be with you from the moment you take that risk to say, I want to build a business, and it's going to probably be a little tight now because I'm going to use some of this revenue to invest here and build these things. Through every point in growing a business, no matter what size, there's always challenges. There's always things that you're going to have to overcome. So a lot of it has to do with mental toughness, I think, but also a passion, because you're doing something that you want to do. And people say you got to love what you do, but I think that I love a lot of what I do. There's definitely aspects that you don't at times, and you got to deal with those, and you got to be able to make hard decisions that other people won't make at times. So that's a little bit of a generalized answer. I apologize for that, but I'll let you ask follow-up questions.
Well, no, I mean, I appreciate the answer, and it was all true. It's part of the journey of running, growing, and operating a business, which is a beautiful thing. And like you said, there's pros and cons, and you kind of have to find those for yourself. What I think is a con might be a pro for you. Yeah. I personally hate bookkeeping, but some people love it, and they would love that part of running their business. So that's awesome. But I'm curious to hear kind of your journey in this topic, from going from self-employed to where you are now. What are some of the highlights from your journey?
Well, as I'm 46 years old now, I started out when I was in college in business, but then really right before I graduated, got married. I was very excited to go into business, and there's a lot of just wonderful things about it. And it suited me well, it fit me well. But I definitely started out self-employed as an investment advisor, got licensed, worked for a company, 1099. And even though I became a branch office manager, built a team of advisors in Colorado. But then over the years, there's just different manifestations of that. We actually had a mortgage company at one point that supplemented it in like the early 2000s, that we said, hey, the biggest expense people have is their mortgage payment. The largest asset they own is their home. They're not looking at it within a financial plan. So we built a mortgage company that we subsequently later shut down. But it was really all the genesis leading up to 2007 when we started Parsonex. And at the time, I think was 29 years old. And I was one of the younger people apparently to ever have a broker dealer, approved by FINRA. It had just become FINRA, it used to be the NASD. And we started out with a plan that was very optimistic. And we said, oh yeah, we're going to just do this little amount of business and look at these profits we're going to make. And then, oh, well, it's a little harder than that. And the revenue was higher. Like, I think we doubled our revenue projections first year. We did like $1 million. We said we'd do 500,000. We did like $1 million in 2008, but the margins were a lot tighter. And so then at some point, you have to kind of reinvent yourself or add things on. But for us, the core has always been in our business is that we want to focus on serving the advisors who are affiliated with our firm, and then also serving the clients, because it's about clients and helping them become financially successful long-term. And when you commit to that, it kind of is guides your decisions. Like, hey, this is what's important to us. And then you do other things. And sometimes you launch initiatives that don't work, and other times you have some that work out really well. And so the journey, it's definitely been a journey, but I think that the consistent thing is that trying to always do the best you can with what you have where you're at. And as it's grown over the years, we're in a business that the efforts really do compound. So I always knew when I was 22, graduating college, that, hey man, this industry looks really interesting. Like, if I don't quit, if I can stick with it long enough to let compound interest kick in, as I'll be a relatively young guy with a decent amount of experience. And that's kind of where I found myself the last few years. And now, I don't want to say I'm feeling old because I'm still pretty young, I think, but I think there's a lot of folks that are now coming up that are quite a bit younger than me. And it's interesting because they're just curious and they're hungry for information. It's now like, wow, I can actually share. They find this interesting that at the time I felt like, oh my gosh, it was very difficult to deal with. And that's what happens in the hindsight of telling these stories. You look at it and go, man, that was crazy, but it doesn't feel like that when you're going through it at times, when you're going through a tough challenge. And so for us, we added on an investment advisor firm in 2012. We were a little bit late actually for that. And then we acquired a firm in New York from a late founder a couple of years ago. That's just fantastic. So we have really, really good people, and we've always tried to build a great culture. But no matter what you do and the best intentions, it doesn't work for everybody. And you just have to accept that people are going to leave, things are going to happen, challenges are going to come up, and we're in a highly regulated industry. So we're always, making sure that we're staying on top of the regulations, doing things the right way, not just in principle and in concept, which everybody should always do, but also dotting the I's and crossing the T's. And so it's really just, I think, been a journey. And I never liked that when I was 22 years old. I never liked that, like, oh, success is a journey. It's not a destination. I'm like, no, it's a goal. We're going to set a goal. We got to get here and got to get here. But I think over time, you do realize that it is really about the process of doing it and helping people and the challenges you get to have being an entrepreneur. I mean, you have to want to embrace challenges, because there's probably 100 things in a company. As soon as you get it past that self-employed, just, when you're breaking out, I should say, there's 100 things that have to happen, and you're probably only good at 5 or 10, maybe 20 if you're really, really good. You can do the other ones, but you have to surround yourself with people that complement who you are. And different personalities can succeed. You mentioned, was it reports earlier? I said, yeah, I'm the same way. I'm like, yeah. I can get into the details, but it's not where I like to spend all my time. And so, but if you're not going to do it, it has to be done in a business. So you have to surround yourself or partner with people like your guys' firm that, says, hey, you have to be excellent in execution at these areas. And if you're not, you need to have somebody either on a consulting basis, on a shared basis, or somebody who is doing those things. Because if you don't do those things, you're going to have a tough time making it. You're probably not going to make it. And if you've watched any of the clips from Nick Saban lately, I've loved seeing his stuff since he retired on YouTube and everything. But he said, he has a statement, who's the University of Alabama football coach, legendary football coach, if anybody's watching and doesn't know. And he said, it takes what it takes. And that's it, right? It takes what it takes. And it's no more, no, it's just that success requires this formula, and you have to do it. And if you go, gosh, I'm not good at this, then great. You're going to have to complement it or find a way around it or mitigate that. But success just takes what it takes, and you got to stick with it, and you got to figure it out. Luckily, if you stick with it and you're persistent and you try to always learn and use resources that are available, you can learn over time, and you can get better over time, and lots of small incremental improvements add up to a big difference over time. But it does take time, and you got to be patient, and you got to work hard.
I love that outlook where, the challenges, people who gone through the challenges are so grateful for them on the other side. And especially in your position where you can give that wisdom back to younger people who are in your position in that time period. And I think back on my own journey, and I think being self-employed was probably being self-employed with relatively stable revenue and income was probably the easiest time in business. But I will say on the other side of that, the most gratifying time and the most I've ever grown as a human being, as a business owner, as an entrepreneur are in all of those challenges. So I wouldn't trade it for the world. I would not ever go back to the easy route. I love the evolution of growing a business and growing a team.
And I think because you obviously have the entrepreneurial DNA, right? But I think for most people though, that's a big challenge. We have this picture where we think, and I'm sure Huberman or somebody has, there's psychological research on this, but I'm not going to be able to cite it directly. But why do people become Navy SEALs? Why do people do very, very difficult things? Why do they climb Mount Everest, right? Because we want to be challenged, right? And so I would agree with you, by the way, before we started the first business in 2003, I remember I kind of just after a few years kind of dialed it in where I'm like, I can play some golf here, this is pretty good. And there's times after that I look back like, man, I could have just had a very cush, good doing this. But we want to be challenged, right? People want to be challenged. That doesn't mean everybody should go start a business just as a challenge. It could be challenging themselves personally or challenging themselves in whatever. But I think that most of the things that are rewarding took toil to acquire, right? Inherited wealth, you can go into all that stuff. It's tough. I mean, it's a coin flip, because if you didn't have to work to acquire it, if it just was given to you or happened to you, then you don't have the same value for the results. It's what makes the good times or the rewarding pieces valuable is that the price you had to pay to get there. And on the front end, just none of us want to hear that. Like, oh man. But I'm very cautious now about initiatives. I've pulled back from certain initiatives in the last 5 years at times because I'm like, no, like but we've already done a lot and it doesn't matter. Like we've done a lot to get to here. It's going to be 10 times that amount of work to get it to here. And I don't really want, that's not what we want. So you have to be very careful that you're investing in things that matter to you.
Yeah, very well said, Jonathan. I appreciate it. This is a great conversation, and it's a conversation people maybe don't want to hear, but should hear. And I'm grateful that we were able to have that today. So for the listeners, if they want to reach out, if they want to learn more about you and your company and what you do, where can they go?
Yeah, Parsonex.com. I think if you go to the team page, it has a CEO section there for us. I think the other thing I would encourage people when they're building their business is pay yourself as well, right? Don't postpone it forever because that's an unending. You're going to get there anyway. Just discipline yourself, pay yourself, and invest early, right? Because if money compounds over time, even if it's a small amount, just try to start investing early and set some stuff aside for the future. And so, again, a lot of times, 25 years in, we learn these things the hard way and like, gosh, I wish I'd done this earlier. So that would be my advice to folks.
I love it. Money and experience compounds over time. So why don't you do both? Get the experience, invest the money, and then you can give that back to other people too and charge for it maybe.
And your efforts. Yes. And that's the other thing, your efforts, because there's not a one-to-one relationship, right? You put all this time up front. It's like farming, right? You plant, there's a season for planting and there's a season for harvesting, but they're disconnected. So
that's right.
Keep working.
I love it. Jonathan, I love to end these episodes with a question, and it's actually a question from you to the audience. And I just believe that powerful questions get powerful answers. So in alignment with the topic here, if going from self-employed to business owner to growing your business, what is a powerful question that the listener, the audience member can ask themselves before they take that leap so they can know if it's right for them or maybe they should take a different path?
I would say, what's stopping me from pursuing this now? Because once you look at that, you go, yeah, I really don't want to overcome that challenge, or I can do this. So, what's preventing me? Because most of the time, the things that are stopping us are things internally, mental, like our own thoughts. And at the end of the day, what is stopping me from executing and moving forward now? And
I love it. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
yeah, hey, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
And for you, the listeners, watchers, wherever you are, all of the details, all the links are down below in the show notes. But the question, what's stopping you? What's stopping you from subscribing? It should be nothing. Go click that button. Please subscribe. We love putting these episodes out every single day of the week so we can help you build a more harmonious business and life. We will see you on tomorrow's episode of Harmonious at Lunch.